Well, I'd like to thank Dr. Ghosh and the Ghosh Clinic for asking me here today. And I'd like to say I was a speaker who could go off bullet points, but unfortunately I'm not. I'm going to have to read a scripted talk because I have so many stories I could take you off in directions you never imagined. So I will try not to sound like a robot. I practiced in front of the family pets this morning. They did not run off howling, so I'm hoping that was a good sign. I started thinking about how to approach this talk over a month ago after Lynette contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in speaking today. I was determined not to put it off until the last minute after all the admonishments I'd given my kids over the years about doing that with their projects. I assumed it would be easy to come up with things to tell you about my son, Jake, because he provided a wealth of material. But it hasn't been easy. It is much harder than I ever imagined to capture his true essence with mere words. I've written things, then deleted them many times over. And guess what? I was down to the wire and still had nothing concrete to share. Everything I put down came out sounding dry and like a cancer timeline. I had slept on it and prayed on it to no avail until inspiration finally came to me at work this past Thursday. Not that I noticed it right away. I've been known to be a little slow to pick up things that are right under my nose. Shortly after Jake passed, a coach with Linn-Mar Youth Baseball came up with the idea of creating t-shirts in honor of Jake for the players and their families to wear at the state tournaments. It was an amazing gesture and was such a comfort to us to see the shirts on so many. I work in the nurse's office at Excelsior Middle School and continue to see many kids wearing those shirts each day. On Thursday afternoon, a student approached me and asked if I would wear my Jake shirt on Friday if she wore hers. I told her I'd be more than happy to do that. I proceeded to head home after work and continued to struggle and strain over what to say today. Lots of writing and lots more deleting. I finally decided to call it a day and head to bed. As I was laying my t-shirt out for the next day, I flipped it over and saw that in honor of Jake, words on the back. Jake was extremely humble and never wanted attention drawn to him, let alone anything being done in his honor. However, I truly felt he was sending me a subtle message that making his cancer the center of my talk was not truly honoring him. It was as if he was saying, if you're going to talk about me, talk about what was meaningful to me and things I was passionate about, not about a disease I hated, but tolerated because I had no choice. And I assume all of you are here today because cancer has touched your life in some way, and nobody needs to hear about someone else's journey with that monster. I once heard a quote in a movie that perfectly sums up how I feel about Jake. The character in the movie also suffered from a debilitating disease. She said, I would rather have 30 seconds of wonderful than a lifetime of nothing special. To put it simply, that is what being Jake's mom was like. He was beautiful, inside and out, and everything a mother could want in a son. His life was far too short by my standards, but each year of those 20 was 30 seconds of wonderful. He was a strong and determined individual who loved fiercely and lived with purpose and direction. He was funny, witty, intelligent, and had wisdom that went far beyond anything he learned in school. His work ethic was unmatched. He was a giver nearly 100% of the time and gave 100% of himself whenever he could. He was a giver of gifts that he loved to watch people open and could barely contain his excitement about what your reaction would be. A giver of time, always willing to jump in and help. A giver of advice, he's willing to listen and give input if you ask for it. A giver of appreciation, never missing an opportunity to say thank you. In fact, one of my most prized possessions is a random note he wrote Kevin and me when he was in middle school and left on our pillow, thanking us for all that we did for him each day. He was a giver of laughter. His sense of humor was witty and dry. A giver of compliments. A giver of the best hugs that made you feel wrapped up in love. And he knew precisely when to dole them out. More than anything else, he was a giver of kindness and genuineness. It is what drew people to him. After undergoing 20+ rounds of chemotherapy, 2 stem cell transplants, whole and targeted radiation to his brain, a touch-and-go 10-hour surgery to remove his abdominal lymph nodes, several rounds of immunotherapy, 2 major brain surgeries, and suffering 2 strokes, one would think that a person who is a giver by nature would have nothing left to give. But that simply wasn't the case with my son. He worked hard to achieve his dreams, and although cancer kept setting up roadblocks, he found a way to work around them. I can't recall a single time that he complained about what he had to go through in terms of treatment, and he had a lot of it. He found a way to keep moving forward, even when scans and tests continued to bring bad news. He was terribly sick, the sickest I have ever seen a person be. His dreams were put on hold time and time again, yet he persevered. He hated waste of any kind, which is why cancer was so frustrating to him. Time wasted in the hospital for treatment. Time wasted at home recovering from treatment. Time wasted in waiting rooms, scans, and labs. Food wasted because he was nauseous or vomiting. He felt it was time he wasn't truly living life, and challenged waste at every turn in his journey. He taught us so much about appreciation of the simple things in life along the way. A breath of fresh air and sunshine on your face that we took for granted until we watched him live at the hospital for a month at a time during his stem cell transplants, rarely setting foot outside the transplant unit, let alone outdoors. He said after he would never take fresh air for granted again, and he didn't. He taught us not to either. He taught us to find joy and peace in a normal day, which we would have described as the same old grind before. When telephone calls and emails about disturbing scan results and subsequent treatments were the norm, a day without those things took on a whole new meaning. Normalcy and uneventful days became a gift. A day not spent in the hospital was to be celebrated, and Jake knew it. He taught us to do that too. Having an appetite and being able to taste food every day took meals from ho-hum to extraordinary. Jake gave us a whole new appreciation for food and functioning taste buds. Knowing that he most likely wasn't going to graduate could have been an excuse for him to abandon the idea of college and living on his own and direct his energy toward less stressful pursuits. But that wasn't his way. He was proud of his scholarships and never took them for granted. He went to class and studied because that is what good students did. He earned and kept a straight A average throughout his time in school, undergoing treatment the whole time. Cancer wasn't even part of that scenario as far as he was concerned. He devoured the material and was truly fascinated by what he was learning. It was a wonderful thing. Last fall, after being in school several months, he decided that he wanted to leave the College of Engineering and go for a biology degree with an emphasis on plant-based science. He had been researching the medicinal use of many plants, including marijuana, and was truly in awe of how they worked and could help people in so many ways. Again, cancer wasn't part of the equation. This was about pursuing something he was fascinated with and passionate about, regardless of any timeline. I once heard a quote that all of us have a terminal diagnosis. So Jake was living the way all of us should. He thought about the future in terms of goals he wanted to achieve. These weren't merely items to be crossed off of a bucket list. This was living for the day and being as prepared as you could for what was ahead. It was around this time that we started having discussions about switching care to Dr. Ghosh. Although Jake received good care in a larger clinical setting, it was really only his cancer that was being treated. He needed a doctor who understood his passion for school and living out each day to the fullest. He needed a doctor who understood that he wouldn't tolerate waste and had no time to waste. Dr. Ghosh and his staff went above and beyond to get to know and understand Jake for the person he was, and they valued what was important to him. Staying late so he could get chemotherapy without missing class. Coming in on a Saturday so he could get a Neulasta shot because he hated wearing the pods. Letting a crowd of his family and friends join him for chemo each week because Jake enjoyed visiting and it helped him to have us there. Dr. Ghosh even once charged Lynette with writing a letter to the editor of the Gazette when the university threatened to pull one of Jake's scholarships. They allowed him to live his life on his terms, and he was able to accomplish so many goals as a result. What a gift. Many, many people prayed for Jake to be healed. And in the end, he was healed, just not in the physical sense. He knew when he was ready to be done, and he never feared dying. He continued to give even in his final days on earth, helping his family and friends come to terms with what was happening. Dr. Ghosh was instrumental in helping us prepare. Spending an evening in our home, teaching us about what Jake's body was trying to tell us. He taught us how to make decisions without basing them on the fear of losing our son. In one final act of selflessness, just before he took his final breaths, Jake asked me if it was okay to go. It was the saddest moment of my life, but also one of the most precious. It is a very powerful experience in life to be with someone when they take their first breath and when they take their last. Ever the giver, Jake continues to give us signs nearly every day that he is nearby. Several months ago, while cleaning out his apartment in Iowa City, an extremely difficult task because he loved it, I noticed a red guitar pick on the ground when I got out of my car. I didn't think much of it at the time, other than you would only find something like that on the ground in Iowa City. When I returned to my car later, I picked it up and set it on a nearby bench. And as I said earlier, I often miss what is right under my nose. It was later on in the day when I had an aha moment while having lunch with my friend, that maybe Jake left it for me the way other people leave pennies for their loved ones. He was passionate about his music, especially playing his bass guitar. Still, I went about packing and forgot to pick it up despite several trips to and from my car. I ended up making it all the way to the interstate to head for home before I realized I had forgotten to pick it up. After much debate, I drove back, but had to park halfway up the block from my original spot. I ran back to the bench to get it, and it wasn't there. I was bummed that I hadn't picked it up earlier, and now it was gone. Maybe I had placed too much emotional value on a piece of plastic anyway. As I was backing out of my parking space, something made me look down, which is unusual since we tend to be looking behind us when we are backing up. There, on the ground, underneath where my car had just been, was that red guitar pick. nowhere near where I had placed it or originally parked. I absolutely knew that Jake left it there for me, and thank goodness he was patient. I miss him each and every day with the most terrible ache, but it is an immense comfort to me that he is finally free. I know he wants us to allow our hearts to heal and find joy, because he has. Recently, while going through pictures, I found it to be quite an emotional experience. They were from times when we had so much hope that he would be cured and go on to do great things, and now he is gone. Could we have done more for him? Was his life here complete? I cried out to Jake and asked him to help me, to give me the sign that he had had a good life and fulfilled dreams while he was here with us. And not more than a moment later, the song "I Lived" played on the radio. The refrain stating over and over, "I did it all." Thank you.